407. Work. Chalcedon Report number 122, October 1975. Modern man has often little pleasure in work because he has no sense of estate and calling. Without this, work for him is meaningless and simply a chore to be performed. The change view of work was rather sharply manifested in Massachusetts, once the home of the Puritans and their dedication to work, in a senatorial election of the 1960s. One candidate was Edward Moore, Ted Kennedy. An opponent charged that Kennedy had never worked a day in his life, an accurate statement and one which he felt would disqualify Kennedy in the minds of voters. The next day, an Irish working man expressed a popular sentiment to Kennedy. "Tell me, boy, you haven't missed a thing." As Olson reports, the election was a runaway. The opponent learned too late that Edward Moore Kennedy's appeal was precisely that he had never worked a day in his life. This placed him on a higher and princely plane. Jack Olson, The Bridge at Chappaquiddick, New York, New York, Ace Books, 1970, page 9. In 19th century America, men who retired in good health or lived off inherited income often left the United States because a contempt for non-working able-bodied men was very great. In 20th century America, such men became presidents and presidential candidates. The change is indeed a dramatic one. It is also an evidence of a radically different religious situation. The reality principle has given way to a pleasure principle. Men live to enjoy themselves, and work is an ugly necessity, which, hopefully, civilization will eliminate. Remember, all over the world during the 1960s, rioting students charged that work was unnecessary and constituted a form of conspiracy to keep man enslaved. The lack of Christian faith has meant not only a decline in purpose of activity or work, but also a radical lack of elementary standards. James Bacon commented this year in his column on the insanity resulting from a lack of standards as it appears in, quote, sex magazines, end quote, heavily produced now in Europe and America. An advertisement in the quote-unquote personals column of one such periodical read, "Couple who digs whips, branding irons, handcuffs and snakes, wants to meet new friends. No weirdos, please." Los Angeles Herald Examiner, June the 9th, 1975, page A10. Where standards are gone, meaning is gone, and, without meaning, work is pointless. Not surprisingly, the ancient proverb, "It is better to work for nothing than to sit idle," is very much forgotten today. Such a statement has meaning only in a world where purpose and activity can have meaning. All of this means that people find the candidate who does not need to work very appealing, having all the romance of Camelot and storybook princes, as Olson noted of Kennedy. It means that work begins to loom in their minds as a form of oppression. For the early socialists, such as Marx and Engels, the working man was, by definition, an oppressed man because he had to work for his living. This attitude has since become commonplace. Such an attitude towards work leads to a decline in productivity. It also leads to an evasion of work, to welfarism and drifting. In the United States in 1974 and 1975, the number of Americans supported by taxes, government employees, the disabled, servicemen, the unemployed, those on welfare, and those on Social Security comes to 80.65 million. Workers in the private sector numbered 71.65 million, and many of these are in services rather than production. As work declines in importance and the workers decline in numbers, society has two alternatives. The first, already in operation, is to compel by taxation, and sometimes by totalitarian measures as well, the minority to support the majority, or to put the non-working majority to work by compulsion. In the Soviet Union, the latter course prevails. There is, technically, no unemployment, but there is not much production either. Without the help of the West, the Soviet Union would collapse. The second possibility is radical collapse, as the whole society falls apart because it is both ungovernable and non-working. Both alternatives are ugly ones. The first is now operative, and the second a growing possibility. Neither offers any solution. Only by a return to a theology of work, that is, of a state and calling, and a theology of rest, or of the Sabbath, can man be both productive and relaxed. This makes all the more urgent the reconstruction of all things in terms of a biblical faith, with a restored doctrine of a state and calling. Work is the key to dominion, and ultimately, the productive and competent will survive and command. The modern perspective, which lionizes the non-working, F.D. Roosevelt, the Kennedys, Rockefeller, etc., is without a future. Its menace is that it can command people and their allegiance. Its failure is that it destroys productivity. To believe that the immediate future is a troubled one is common sense. To believe that the future is a doomed one for man is practical atheism. It is a denial that God's order governs creation and makes, in the long run, any condition of life untenable other than that which conforms to the law of God. We have been called not to defeat nor to slavery, but to victory and dominion.